Alright my friends, I know this video took a bit to come out, but I wanted to take my time with this game and really savor it. Because there isn't a lot of experiences like this in gaming anymore. Ones that respect your emotional maturity, some that, are okay with taking it slow a little bit. You don't always have to be blasting away at things. You don't always have to be going a million miles an hour. A lot of the times it's literally just about the journey, and the journey is what makes a game so good. Heck, you can even look at the example of Journey, the game, and how that grabbed people so intensely, and how it's regarded as one of the best games of the PS3 era. But here, we don't just have these slow moments. We don't just have the walking for, 70% of the game like in the first Death Stranding. And to some, that might actually be a problem. A lot of people really just do enjoy the delivery system and planning your routes and doing all that. Now, I'm not here to say this game ain't got that. It has that in spades. But for the sequel, Kojima and Kojima Productions have really gone above and beyond in including so darn much in this game, and a lot of it I was truly surprised to see, because their inclusion came as a very big surprise to me. However, before I get deep into the review, know that I am super biased towards Kojima and Kojima Productions and their games. I am a diehard Metal Gear Solid fan. I love every single one of them, 3 standing up as my most favorite of all of them. And Death Stranding 1 has a very special place in my heart, as I made a video not too long ago on how it's one of my favorite weird games. So with all of that, let's get into why I think this game is so good. But there is definitely way more to love about this one than even the first one. And this game has basically ended up being everything that I wanted from the sequel. So let's talk about some gameplay positives and even some negatives. Almost every system that returns from Death Stranding 1 feels tuned to perfection here. Traversal feels better, especially since it accompanies great motion capture for a ton of animations that accentuate every reaction and action that Sam takes. More vehicles are used for traversal and can be discovered throughout the game, and some later coming as a complete surprise, and I absolutely love them all. And the inclusion of trams in this game is also very unique, and the process of building up the buildings and making your trams and their path is just as satisfying as building roads was in the first game, or even this one. Combat feels better and has many options for your encounters. From special hand-to-hand combat moves, including blocking and special moves that can be accumulated over the course of the game, to a myriad of weapons that are at your disposal if you take the time to seek them out by making deliveries and doing missions to up your star rankings with the various NPCs all over the continent. And this also extends to the amount of structures that can be built in the open world. Some structures from Death Stranding 1 make a return, but there are just as many added to increase their usefulness and bring in even more diverse gameplay. Gameplay diversity on that note is much higher, not just delivering, even though that's still the main thing though. You will be using stealth, that hand-to-hand combat we talked about, with even combos when you get to learn how to string them together, the vehicle combat against fast foes on the roads, and even 2 different Pokemon style systems where you can capture animals to take to safety, and even capture large BTs to then release against other giant BTs for some cool kaiju style fights. There are more to the NPCs in this game, and more of them that you'll meet out in the world. And they all have their own stories to tell, and a lot of times, a lot of their stories will interconnect with each other, and these characters will know each other, thus giving backstory to not just themselves, but each other in a more natural flowing way than in the first game, where everyone was just kind of doing their own thing. They never really acknowledged each other's existence except for in a few choice situations. And when it comes to customization, there is a ton of new options, whether that's for your vehicles, Sam, Dolman's outfit, or even the colors of your DHV Magellan. It feels like there's even more incentive to even raise the level of NPCs, not just for your weapons, but to get just more awesome tools, cosmetic items, and customization items for your vehicles that were honestly game changers, especially things like the sticky cannon for the off-roader, which just picks up gear without you having to get out or anything, and it is just the most wonderful thing to just accumulate and get a lot of lost cargo to then deliver to then help upgrade your NPCs. But the world isn't the only thing you'll be battling against. You'll be finding a lot of different factions of people. You'll find a lot of chiral creatures that are going to make your life very difficult, and even mechanized units which you're either going to want to avoid or come in guns blazing and ready to fight. So as much as this game is a walking simulator, it is just as much like 5 or 6 other genres of games as well, which really kept me engaged the entire way through, and still is, as I am definitely not done playing. Now there are some negatives that I found, and maybe they're not the biggest thing, but they did affect my experience a few times. You can get caught in some unavoidable situations that can force you to replay some sections. A good example of this for me is during a forest fire type area, and a just random tree falls, and like you ain't moving fast enough to get out the way, so when this tree falls and hits you over the head and destroys your packages, you kind of have no choice but to just redo that section. And I had to do it 2 or 3 times because of similar issues, and it was a little frustrating, but not the biggest deal. Just know that that can happen. Indoor and small corridor sections still have some jankiness, just like the first game when it comes to the camera. It kind of has trouble keeping Sam in frame and keeping the action kind of in view when the camera is super close to any kind of wall or has anything behind Sam that's really close. This also makes shooting really difficult when in tight corridors, as you need to come out quite a ways to be able to even shoot, or you get this little yellow circle that says, nah, you ain't shooting this guy. Another issue I have with the combat is dealing with the bosses in this game. As much as they are a spectacle and really freaking cool, a lot of them just boil down to them being bullet sponges, which, you know, having different mechanics like points on them to shoot and shooting things in different order to expose weak points on or other bosses, I did find it a little underwhelming that every boss could just be taken care of the same way, especially the humanoid bosses, which even in the first game, like with Clifford Unger, for example, are very, very easy and barely even bullet sponges because you can take them down quite quickly, which kind of brings down the impact of their boss fights. I will also say that if you are a big fan of just delivering things like in the first one, where that's 90% of what you're doing, this game has a lot shorter deliveries and tends to be a lot easier on you in the beginning. But in some cases, this can result in you getting more stars more quickly, which lets you get more gear and gives you more options on how you want to tackle your assignments in the future. Now, let's talk about the presentation. This game looks freaking fantastic, guys. That's all I gotta say on that front. Not really. When you play on the base PS5 or even on the PS5 Pro, this game runs very well and looks immaculate in its presentation. This game, like many others, has 2 modes that you can play in. One to either prioritize frame rate in frame rate mode, which runs at 1440p at 60 FPS, or you can play at a higher resolution like an upscaled 4K in 30 FPS. For me, I played in the frame rate mode 95% of the time, as the visual fidelity gained with between the 1440 and 4K wasn't really worth the sacrificed visual clarity while playing at 30 FPS. This is also just one of the most photorealistic games you're gonna play, period. So you want to see that detail, especially when it comes to the characters. Motion capture here is on another level. Characters' emotions and facial animations, in general, are caught in amazingly crazy detail. Environments also look freaking immaculate, including the intro of this game, which darn near looks like real life, I swear. To the point where the only negative thing I would even have to say about the graphics is that the reflections in this game don't really hold up all that well. They do look a little odd at times and a bit blurry, but without using ray tracing at all in this game, the lighting and the art direction carry so hard, and the fidelity of how detailed everything is really makes this just the ultimate graphics showcase. And whenever the inevitable PC port comes out, I am sure that is just going to look next level. It's going to look so good if it looks this good here on console, especially on base PS5. You also can't discuss this game without talking about the music. You get to the top of a mountain, that freaking music kicks in, and you just are just taken over by this emotion of just, wow, what a journey, what a view. Now, some issues did rear their head, some major issues that I had actually on the base PS5. Now, this isn't like a widespread issue, mind you, but I could find quite a few people with the same issue I was having, and that was that this game had some stuttering issues here and there. And when it had these stutters, it was also cutting out with the audio. And wasn't the biggest deal. However, as the game went on, they got to be more and more frequent. Example of that here. However, I did also have the opportunity to try this game out on PS5 Pro, as I recently upgraded to the Pro during this whole situation. I figured since I was having these issues, and I've been planning on getting one anyway, and on the PS5 Pro front, I will say this. The image quality is even better in a frame rate mode, and so much better that it almost invalidates the need for quality mode completely. It's supposed to be still at 1440p 60 FPS, but I'm pretty sure that the PSSR, which is, PlayStation's version of DLSS, is really doing some heavy lifting in bringing a much sharper image to you while playing in this mode. And I could tell immediately when I was playing that it looked way better. Also, any skips or audio cutting out or anything was just completely eliminated. And that 60 FPS cap was met, and never did I once see another frame drop. The extra horsepower in the PS5 Pro was really apparent in a lot of these cases, and in some areas you can even notice that your draw distance has gotten a lot further, and a lot of distant objects like distant mountains and structures have a lot more detail on the PS5 Pro than they do on the base model. But it's not something that would really affect your moment-to-moment gameplay. It's just something that I really appreciated, and I love seeing tangible differences like this when you are going from a base PS5 to a PlayStation 5 Pro. Now let's get to the meat and potatoes, and that is the story. The story of Death Stranding is by far the standout part of the package, at least for me. And a lot of the issues that myself and others had with the first game have been more or less ironed out here. In the first game, the story kind of felt like it was busy trying to explain the nature of the world with very long and drawn out exchanges and dialogue that just basically ended up being just exposition dumps. And the actual plot was a bit confusing even for the most committed players to keep straight, given its disjointed nature while being told at very specific times, they ended up being pretty far apart. But the most important aspect, and this is spoilers for the first game, so be warned here, was that after Sam completed his journey and connected the country, he leaves with Lou, his BB, to have a life free of Bridges, his employer, and the UCA. This gives Death Stranding 2 a kind of reset on how the story is told and presented. It feels much more focused and directly deals with the characters, especially with the journey between Sam, Lou, and Fragile. And it doesn't struggle as much with long exposition dumps to try and explain every little thing, given that that has already been established. But there are really two key things I feel are the most important to know about Death Stranding 2's story. One is the fact that this game spends almost no time getting you hooked into the story. Within the first couple hours, I hit the end of chapter 1. And let me tell you, I was in distress, man. The introduction to this game is wild and an emotional roller coaster, and at no point in the story does that really let up. In this game, we deal with some very heavy subject matter, because Kojima and the writers at Kojima Productions do respect their players' emotional maturity, and it's honestly a breath of fresh air to have been so emotionally invested in a game's story while dealing with subject matter that is definitely not in the norm for video games to tackle in general. One of the big key things in this game being unborn babies and their pregnant mothers and their connections to the other side being a very big part of the story. And a lot of that can really get to some people, but I honestly think it is so awesome that they had the writing chops to really tackle this subject matter with such ease and have it just come off just so genuine, and had me just deeply caring about the characters dealing with all of this, especially as a father myself. So know that when you get into this story, it's going to be dealing with some things and you're probably going to be distressed, but that is the entire point. Games are meant to have you feel emotion, have you feel invested in caring about the characters and their stories, especially in a story-driven game such as this. The second thing is the characters in this game. There isn't a single character in this game I did not enjoy watching or interacting with. While it's awesome to see and interact with characters that we know from the first game, it's the new characters here that really steal the show. New characters that are aptly named in true Kojima fashion, like Tarman, the captain of the DHV Magellan, with his own Tarcat? We'll go with that. There is also Dolman, a man whose soul is stuck inside of a doll's shell as he tries to find a way to free himself with the help of the crew. Rainey, who is a mother surrounded by rain whenever she steps outside. And Tomorrow, a mysterious girl that is discovered by the crew and has a suite of her own badass abilities to go along with her. The team's journey through Australia is both memorable and emotional, but also not without its moments of levity. And it definitely still has some of that same Kojima weirdness, maybe even more than the previous game actually.
Those who dare disrespect pizza do not deserve to live.
If you were a fan of the first Death Stranding, this is really the story you deserved for the sequel. But if you are new to this series, you really want to play the first, or at least watch a very detailed rundown of that game's story, because you will be completely lost here, not to mention being caught off guard by some of the more eccentric parts of the story. And on a side note, I see you, Kojima. I see all those Metal Gear Solid Easter eggs and references. There are a ton of callbacks to that series in this game. Some may actually make you raise an eyebrow, and others you're just like, man, Kojima, you is pushing it. Konami gonna be calling you one of these days, I swear to God. We are dealing with some of Metal Gear Solid's most iconic moments being kind of recreated here in different ways, which personally I absolutely love being such a big fan of those games, but I can see other people kind of thinking it's a little self-indulgent at times, which is kind of par for the course. Kojima can get a little out there sometimes. Overall, I think I just absolutely adore this game. Heck, I don't even think I know I do. I will likely 100% this entire thing, as I thoroughly enjoy the gameplay loop and just enjoy being in this world. Some of that, I am sure, comes from being a fan of the first game, but even if you weren't a fan of the first, or felt like the gameplay didn't quite click with you, this may not completely change your mind on the series, but that's okay. I am glad that Kojima Productions didn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel and change the basics so far that it lost sight of what made Death Stranding so unique in the first place. At times, it may ride that line though, but I came out of this game thankful that it was everything that I had personally hoped for in a sequel to one of my favorite games. I definitely recommend picking this one up. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching my video on Death Stranding 2 on the beach. I took my time going through this game, so thanks so much for your patience and your viewership. If you enjoyed this review and look at Death Stranding 2, consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video. Hopefully, I will talk to you again in the future. Until then, I'm Havoc Fanatic. Peace.